All right. Welcome to the Legal Pop-Up hosted by Legacy Legal and Consulting Firm on Going Global, legal considerations for doing business internationally. I am Chayla Jackson. I am a trademark and business attorney, and I'm also the CEO and founder of Legacy Legal and Consulting Firm. I'm also serve as chief legal counsel for some of my clients. And so at Legacy Legal and Consulting Firm, we are a virtual law firm for purpose-driven CEOs on the go. Look, we're busy. You're busy. Life is moving, and you wear multiple hats, whether you're a mom, dad, but you also are CEO. And so you need access to legal counsel while you're on the go. Now, one of the things that came to my attention this year with potential clients is that the climate and economic environment that we're in is that my client said, look, until I'm on the ground with certain things financially, until my business at a certain place, they couldn't really move forward with certain services, but they needed access to the legal knowledge, legal education. And so legal pop-ups was an idea that came forth. And this topic was actually recommended by someone in our community. So you will have an opportunity, you'll receive an email. I know I said that the newsletter was coming out this week. Y'all just have grace with me. It's going to come out next week, okay? It's going to come out next week. I just needed a little break this week. And so with the newsletter, there's going to be an opportunity for you to submit any topics that you want to learn about. As you can see, this is free. All you got to do is sign up, register. And when you do, you'll get access to the replay. Registration allows for you to get access to the Q&A. And so that's a bonus benefit of you actually investing and taking a step of action to be here. Now, once you register once, you don't have to register again. So you're on the list for all of 2025. But if we don't have any more suggestions, then I may not do another legal pop-up, okay? So if there's something that you're like, I want to learn more about this, be very clear, and I will do a pop-up for you, okay? Or if I don't know it, then I'll try to find somebody to come in and help us all because I don't know everything. All right, so with that said, let's get started. Look, this is a conversation, and so we're going to have a conversation. So let me change my screen, and you feel welcome to turn your camera on. You're not going to be on the recording, but I can see you here. But let's get started. So we're going to talk about legal considerations for going global. Now, one of the things with going global is that many people think that going global means if they do business internationally, that they actually had to do business with an international client, or they're getting products from overseas. But the reality is, it is so easy to go international in today's society. Whether it's you offer a free download, and somebody from outside of the US downloads it, data privacy laws, y'all. Now you have gone international. Somebody purchases something from you, you've gone international. Maybe you are doing work with other clients overseas, you've gone international. And so I want to give you some legal considerations for things to consider that you might not have thought about. And especially in this climate where tariffs are on the table, you want to factor that into in terms of your bottom line and how you do business. So let's start off with some legal considerations. So first, I'm going to do very general, and then I'm going to get into more specific. So first up in our general category is business structure readiness. Is your business structured and ready for going international? So do you have your correct structure? Do you have legal protection? And so one of the things that you want to make sure with doing business international is that your personal assets are protected. And so you can do that with an LLC or a corporation. Now, here's the thing I did not have on my notes to tell you, is that when you are doing business, there's something called piercing the corporate veil. So your LLC and corporation acts like a veil. It shields you personally, your personal assets, your bank accounts. Maybe you have 401ks, Roth IRAs. Maybe you have investments, personal investments, all of your personal assets. When you have an LLC, now it's shielded. It's a veil that separates you individually from your LLC. So your LLC protects you, limited liability. Same with corporation, you have some protection. But if you mix your business and your personal money, you essentially are treating your business and your personal as if you're one. And so what a court can do if you were ever sued is they look and they say, hold on, you haven't been operating like a business. So now we're going to pierce the corporate veil because you pierced it first. And we're going to treat you and your business as one. And this is how people are able to recover from the individual person rather than just the business. Because if the business was operating the way it should be, they could only recover for the amount that's in the business. Only the amount that's in the business. Now, if they recover for over that, then you would have to get like on a payment plan and all of that. But typically it's limited for your personal liability. It's limited to the amount that's in the business. But if you violate the laws of business, now they can pierce that corporate veil and they can go after your assets. So you want to make sure that your business is properly structured correctly. Okay. All right. Number 2, you want to make sure that you have a registered business name or trademark. So you want to check if you're intentionally, now this is for those who you are intentionally doing business overseas, then you want to protect your trademarks. Not everything in your business needs to be trademarked. Okay. I am a trademark attorney, but I am also a practical attorney, y'all. I had a business. I understand. Some people get frankly like, I got to trademark this. No, you don't have to trademark everything. You need to trademark your most valuable assets. And then you can build from there with time. But you want to make sure if you're going to go overseas, you want to make sure that your business, your trademark, and your business name is protected. Now, here's why. There are some things that people in China do where they actually will register the trademark when they see you register in the US. And what that does is that it acts as a block. And so you want to do a trademark search in the country that you intentionally want to expand to make sure that your trademark is not already registered. Why? Because if you get ready to intentionally go over to do business in another country, then what happens is that now you're committing trademark infringement, all because somebody else registered. And so let me just briefly say this. There is no such thing as worldwide trademarks. So trademarks are based on jurisdiction. So you have a trademark in the United States, and then you have a trademark, you may have a trademark rights in other countries. They all have their own trademark laws. So when you talk about protecting your trademarks, you can have a trademark even if you don't register it, but it has to be based on that country's laws. So in the US, you got to be using it in commerce. You got to be using the mark in order for trademark protection to apply, and there's some other conditions. In other countries, so let me go back. In the US, it's first to use. That's how you get the rights. Whoever is the first to use it has priority rights. In other countries, it's not first to use. It's first to file, meaning whoever files first is who gets the trademark rights. So you have to be aware of where you are intentionally expanding internationally and what their intellectual property laws are so that you don't lose your rights. Because if a country is first to file and they file a trademark for your exact name, guess what? Now you are barred from going into that country unless you rebrand, and that can be costly. Okay. Next, number 3 is international market entry strategy. So you want to choose the right legal method for entering another country internationally. And that could be through exporting, licensing, distribution, through joint ventures agreement, or by having a subsidiary. You want to make sure that you choose the right methods that properly enter the country. Now, for those of you who are like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to remember that, that's okay. You know what I did for you? I created a checklist PDF. And so by you being here, you're going to get that. All right. So just calm, relax. It's okay. I have a checklist for you. And I'm willing to share it with my notes. Now, for those of you who may be on YouTube watching this, you can go to legacylegalconsult.com/products. That page is our resource page. And so I will include a link there. I'll include a link there. Just check back if you don't see it, where you can download the checklist. Okay. But if you are here, you're going to get the link to the checklist. So don't worry. Don't worry. Don't worry. I get it. I get it. And what I'll also do is I'll actually give you my notes, because the checklist is not going to have everything that's here. All right. So you want to include the international market entry strategy because, again, you're entering into a new country. So you have to make sure that you're following their laws. And that comes with another set. So you want to do due diligence. Here, I had a client a couple of months ago where we were actually doing her business and legal strategy because one of the benefits of sometimes working with me is that as you grow your business, we can marry business with legal strategy, and I can help. That's what a chief legal counsel does, is help you shift your business strategy to marry the law. And so one of the things that she wanted to do in terms of her vision, because here at Legacy, we think we talk about your vision. It's not just right now, where are you expanding? One of her vision points was to expand into certain countries. And so I had to get very clear, what countries? What countries do you want to expand into? Why am I doing that? Because if I know the countries now, if you plan to expand into an international country within, let's say, 3 to 5 years, before you expand, you can start preparing to do that. You can start preparing your trademark. Maybe you want to file the trademark in the new country. You can start preparing your entryway before you actually enter. So preparation is important. Okay. Next in our general legal considerations is doing due diligence on partners. So if you are working with vendors, agents overseas, or other partners to expand internationally, you want to do due diligence. You can do due diligence through online reviews. You can interview people who have worked with them before. You can look at their social media. The comment section is where people can get off the chain, y'all. But it also will give you some insight, and you have to use discernment to know, is this a spam review? Is this just a disgruntled person? But if there are multiple bad reviews or comments, that gives you a insight into the character of the people, the character of the company. Because there's a company a couple of years ago that I just didn't know no better, y'all. I was young. It was a couple of years ago. I was just getting really started in business. I invested in them, and they offered a lifetime deal. How about recently? I was like, you know what? I actually need that. And I went and I could not access my accounts. They're an international company. I could not access my accounts. And so then I decided to look them up. Do you know that they had been reported to the Better Business Bureau, and it had been reported as spam? And I wasn't the only one dealing with it. So doing your due diligence can actually help you avoid that and help you avoid money issues, but also think about your reputation, the reputation of your company. If you're working with someone to actually provide any services to your clients or your customers, okay? All right, so next section is sales and customer compliance. So you want to consider international terms and conditions in your policies. So you want to draft, and not just your policies, your contracts as well. You want to draft very clear contracts for foreign customers. That in terms pricing, delivery, returns, governing law, y'all. And so when you're doing international, you want to be very clear that, look, maybe you have a contract for your US clients, and you have a contract for foreign clients. And in this contract, terms need to be modified. And so you want to be very clear. What's the pricing? And remember the currency exchange rate, y'all. Currency exchange rate. What's the pricing? Is it going to be in US dollars, or is it going to be in the euro, the yen? What is it going to be in? And make sure that you do the numbers. Look, years ago, I actually, for my high school, has been over so many years. For my high school graduation trip, we went to Mexico, Cancun. And I'll never forget, baby, they was getting over on me because I did not understand the currency exchange rate with the pesos. But let me tell you, you get scammed a couple of times, and you understand. That's not what it is. I know exactly what the current. This is how many pesos. Okay, look, 17-year-old Chayla was learning real quick the currency exchange, so I didn't get taken advantage of. You want to do the same for your international clients, and take in consideration tariffs. So you're gonna have to stay on top of what's going on internationally in the country where you have clients or where things are going, so that when you are doing the pricing for your business, not before you share it with them, but guys, we do our individual pricing to make sure that we're covering expenses, that it's actually married, and that we don't lose money. You want to make sure that it matches up and that you're not losing money because of the conversion rate, okay, or tariffs and other things, taxes that have to come out. Also, governing law. So this is the law that governs the interpretation of the contract. So you're going to have to decide, okay, is it going to be governed by the international law or the laws of your state? And when it's international law, this is you want to make sure it's the laws of the country. The country, y'all, the country, not just the continent, the country. Okay, and get even specific. If it says the laws of this, you want to get very specific. It's usually a country or their equivalent of state. Okay, because usually the equivalent of state. Where is it? All right, next you want to consider foreign consumer protection laws. So in the US, we have consumer protection laws. Over there, they have consumer protection laws as well. So you want to understand the policies for the countries. Each country has different laws, refunds, warranty, and what are your disclosure obligations? Now, let me put this here too. When you are doing marketing, if you're doing any influencer marketing, you're using someone to help you, there are also disclosure requirements there and disclaimers. So you want to be aware of the marketing laws and the advertising laws in that country as well, so you don't get fined. In the US, that is FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. They go after people, y'all. You want to make sure that you comply there. Now, here's what I'll say. For most part, if you're doing products, there are certain warranties that are built in, but depending on the law, because we're talking about international, so you have to know their law. And sometimes you can do this with a quick Google search. Y'all, don't let lawyers think that we don't do Google. I just did it today for a client. I was Googling the law, but I actually know how to go into the statute. I know how to go into the statute to confirm, but I Google. So there's a difference, okay? Don't rely on ChatGPT to help you, because ChatGPT gives hallucinations, meaning they give you false information. And there's been attorneys who actually are facing disbarment because they submitted what ChatGPT gave them because it wasn't real. So be careful with ChatGPT. But you can Google, and Google can kind of help pinpoint you and help direct you, but make sure that you get into the law if you feel like you can understand the law, or consult an attorney. Okay, some products, they have built-in warranties. Some of it you can contract out of it, some of it you can't. And so you want to understand what the warranties are. For services, we can give warranty through ourselves. Like you guys have probably heard money back guarantee. Y'all, I don't even do that no more. Lifetime access, I don't do that no more, because in the US, if you do it, you got to back it up. And what I did that recently, I have another business where I teach, and one of the first classes I did was a startup boot camp where I went through classes and taught them how to actually do it themselves. And I said, lifetime guarantee. This year, actually at the end of last year, I shut down my website, which means that their access was now gone. So now I had to figure out how to provide them access. Just don't do it, okay? It's just a habit. Just don't even promise it. It sounds good for sales, but it's not good in practice for you. All right, so you want to think about foreign consumer protection laws. And so sometimes what happens is that the laws in the US sometimes they're similar laws in another country. Okay, it's similar. And that's what I've been finding when I have been looking at contracts, is that some of the language in our US contracts are similar to other countries. All right, next, for products, you want to be sure that you're compliant if you have a product with product labeling requirements. Here in the US, it's FBA, and I believe FTC as well, what your label actually has to have on it. And similar in that country, they protect their consumers. So you have to follow their product labeling. The language, sometimes you might have to put it in their language. Y'all, okay, let me finish this. The language, safety, and content. So you want to be sure. And if there are any warnings that you need to disclose, you need to put that. In the US, there's a requirement for products that you have to say where it's made. So whether it's made in the US or made somewhere else, you guys have probably seen that. If you haven't, just if you sell products, this is how you learn it. Look at a well-known manufacturer, client, company, and grab one of their products, and you'll see what's on the label. That's it. But every product is different. So if you're selling t-shirts, guess what? T-shirts have different requirements than, let's say, a facial moisturizer, different requirements, or shaving cream, different requirements. So you want to be mindful of the different label requirements, both in the US, but internationally as well, because you may have to change the label depending on the country that you're going in. Now, I'll say this, because local language, please don't use Google Translate. Y'all, please don't use Google Translate, okay? When I was in law school, my second year of law school, I actually taught law in DC at, what is it called? It was an international high school. I'm blanking on the name right now. But my first class it was an international school. So it was a mix of folks who were from El Salvador, different countries, Mexico, but they were in DC. And so y'all, they punked me so bad speaking Spanish, acting like they didn't speak English. And I don't speak English. I mean, I don't speak Spanish. Now, I love to travel to Spanish speaking countries, but I don't speak the language. Just don't ask me why I do that. I just don't do it. Okay. I don't know why. But they punked me so bad until one of my professors, teaching fellows came in and he spoke Spanish. And he said, they just messing with you. And so I started translating my work in English. One side was English, the other side of the work was in Spanish, but I used Google Translate. Some of those translations did not translate, y'all. So you would just want to be mindful of using Google Translate when you are trying to translate things and, save money. It may be better for you to hire a translator through maybe Fiverr or something that's, a reputable one though, where it's been proven that their translation is actually accurate. Because you also want to avoid liability if you use the wrong language, but also think about cultural differences. You don't want to use language that could actually offend your potential clients or customers. All right. Other considerations are sales tax, VAT, and GST. So some countries actually require foreign sellers to collect taxes like VAT or GST. VAT and GST are the same. It just depends on the country that is applied to. All right, so you want to be mindful of sales tax. Let me say this, sales tax is not just for products. Some services are taxable. So you want to be aware of what are the taxable products and services for you to have sales tax, collect sales tax in each country that you're expanding into. Other things, and I talked about this, is payment terms and currency risk. So clarifying the currency, the timing, and the method of payment in your international contracts. Contracts are not just written contracts, it's also your sales policies. A sales policy is a contract, okay? So that's where you can do it. And then the last part in this section is e-commerce law compliance. So you want to ensure that your website complies with international e-commerce laws, such as cookie policies and accessibilities. I do know in the United States that e-commerce, like your payment processors have to, I think it's called PCI compliant. It's been a while since I taught on this, but it has to be PCI compliant, meaning that the processor is where they put their credit card information is secure. It's secure, okay? And there's a certain rating compliance checks that they have to go through. And so sometimes we use payment processors like Stripe, Square, or PayPal. They have to comply with these. So you want to be mindful of what's overseas as well. All right, intellectual property. So I mentioned that there's no worldwide intellectual property laws. You have to apply based on or follow their laws. And so U.S. trademarks doesn't apply to international laws in terms of that. But you can use a U.S. trademark application to help you get trademark rights in another country. Some countries actually allow that, and then other countries require that you apply independently. If you have a patent or design, you want to think about protection internationally as well. And so that means filing for protection in that country. Copyright registration, same thing. Not universal, but if you want protection that nobody steals your copyrights, then you want to register there. Now with copyrights, you want to make sure if registration is even required. So in the US, you're required to register your copyright if you want to sue for infringement, but in another country, it might not be the case. So you might be able to get away with not registering your copyright, but you want to make sure, does copyright protection automatically apply without registration? And if it does, okay, cool, you have copyright protection. Then you want to find out, do you have to register in order for the copyright, in order for you to sue for infringement or go after infringers in that country? Next, protecting trade secrets. So trade secrets by nature have to be kept secret. And so this is not something that you reveal to the public or in your contracts. This is something that you reveal to the public or in just revealed just to anyone. You have to keep it secret. So you want to make sure that you have really good confidentiality clauses, non-disclosure clauses in your contracts with international partners and employees, and build in penalties because trade secrets have to be kept secret. And then licensing and distribution agreements. So if you're going overseas and you're trying to license, because sometimes you can license your work to be used overseas, or distribution, Then you want to make sure that you have really good contracts in place. And here's the thing, when it comes to licensing your intellectual property, you want to build in quality assurance control. This is how you make sure you don't lose your IP rights, but you also manage how they're using it. Because say, for instance, that you are licensing your trademark. So you're expanding and you're allowing your international partners to use your trademark, your brand. You want to make sure that they're using it in compliance with how your trademark is registered in the US and how you want it secure in that country. That way they're not using it incorrectly. And that includes the R symbol. The R symbol is only for federally registered trademarks. So you want to know what the symbol is in that country and use it appropriately. But the R symbol is for the classes that you're registered in. It's not for every class. Okay. All right. So that's intellectual property. All right. I'm looking at the time and trying to make sure. Hiring and employment. Hiring and employment. Hiring when you get ready to hire. So again, laws are different in every jurisdiction. So you want to make sure that you're following the labor laws of that country. Here's the biggest thing is employment classification. So labor laws apply to different labor laws apply to different, I see your question, Jeffrey, give me one moment. Labor laws apply differently. So it may, in that country, it may apply to just employees. They may have contractor laws. In the US, depends. I found out recently that New York has contractor or freelancer laws. So you have to be mindful of the laws for independent contractors as well as employees and make sure that you follow those laws. And then that depends on properly classifying. So you have to know how they classify. And so how we classify in the US may not be how they classify overseas. Because oftentimes what happens is sometimes we may hire a VA and we hire them as a contractor. And so you just want to be mindful, are you actually complying with that country's laws? Okay. Let me see this question that's right here. Okay, so additional costs. What if you host an event in multiple foreign countries that includes food, services, hotel accommodations, transportation, so on? Did you say products and services may incur additional costs? If so, can you elaborate, please? Okay, so we're talking in general because, every country is different. So you have to know that country. Do they tax events? Do they put tax on hotel accommodations? Maybe, and here's what you can think about. If you're hosting it, do you have a partner host? Because if your partner host can take care of hosting in that country and then you come in as a venture, then you can kind of shift the costs and the burdens, because they may, depending on the country, they may have greater costs if you're a foreigner versus if you are a native. So you can shift those costs. But yes, it depends on how you structure it. So if you're selling food, typically food is taxed. At least in the US it is. So you also want to be mindful of what licenses you need, what permits you might need. So that requires research. But if the hotel can provide all of those services as a part of the package, that's a little bit different. And so again, there's more that I would need to know. But again, in your research, you want to think about how can this be inclusive if you're hosting in multiple foreign countries, and how can you possibly partner with somebody to host you as you host the event to shift those costs in the contract. So I hope that helps in that regard. Now, your individual travel costs, your individual hotel costs, that's a little bit different. That's a business write-off for you. But when it comes to what you're actually doing in that country, then that is where you need to be mindful of the additional costs that you might need to build in and what you're actually allowed to do. So I hope that answers your question. If not, let me know. Okay, getting back to hiring and employment legal considerations for doing business international. Once you identify whether it is a contractor or an employee, because there are fines and penalties if you get this wrong, then next you want to consider, do you need work visas or permits? And so if you have US staff that's going to be working abroad, then you need that. Let me just put this here. If you have US staff, y'all just don't even let them work abroad. Just don't do it. Just don't do it, because it gets complicated once you do that, and you get into possibly, if they stay in the country too long, now you got to pay that country's employee tax. So now your expenses grows because you have a U.S. citizen working somewhere else. And if you have been paying attention to the immigration situation in our country, it's probably not a good idea right now. Just try to be working overseas, unless you got a clear path, okay, and a way to get back. Other things, payroll and tax withholding abroad. So you want to make sure that you are withholding the correct amount if they're an employee. Employment contracts. You want to make sure that you're in contracts, if you're hiring local in that country, actually use their language. So you don't want there to be a language barrier, because contracts are about meeting of the minds. And so they need to be able to understand the language. And if they don't understand the English language or legal language, then you're going to have to translate that into their native language to help you avoid any attacks against your contracts. Other things for employees, especially, is if it requires any benefits or Social Security contributions. So you want to understand what's mandatory and what's not if you're going to be hiring. Okay, next is trade and compliance. Trade and compliance. So when we're trading, this means we're trading overseas and trying to be compliant with the laws. First, you need to understand export control laws. So what are products or services, products or tech that requires less government approval before you can export it to another country? Next is, I forgot to fill out this name. I know it, but OFAC, it's like the Office of Foreign something sanctions. Essentially, what happens is sanctions and embargoes. What happens is there are certain countries that certain countries and people we cannot do business with. So there's like a database they have. It's been years since I've had to use it. There's a database that they have. You can just Google OFAC sanctions, and there's a database where you can search the company or the individual name to see if they're on that list and if they've been sanctioned. If they're on that list, you actually can legally get in trouble for doing business with someone that the US says you're not supposed to be doing business with. Because some people on that list, they call terrorists. Some people on that list have been the list includes multiple different people. So you want to make sure they're not on that list. And that's not just for international, y'all. That's also for the US as well. Yeah, most people don't know that. So you just want to be mindful so that you don't get in trouble. Next is customs documentation requirements. So if you're shipping things overseas, if you're exporting, you want to make sure that you have accurate invoices, packaging lists, and certifications of origin. Where did it originate from? So that it actually gets to its destination and it passes customs. Import duties and tariffs. So y'all, I'm gonna be honest with you. The most I know about import duties is when I'm coming back from a cruise or coming back from a country, and I gotta take care of that. So you want to be mindful of making sure that you calculate the cost for coming into the country, out of the country for your import duties. Country of origin labeling. And so again, this goes back to labeling requirements, making sure that you label the country of origin and materials and ingredients. So if it's in the US, it's in the US. If it's in Mexico, it's in Mexico. You just want to properly do that. And you've seen examples of that. When you go grocery shopping, you'll see how some tomatoes are from Mexico and some avocados might be from Chile. I'm just making stuff up, but some things come from Chile. So you see they put the origin on that, although they're importing into the United States. Vice versa, it matters as well. All right, let's talk about data privacy, data and privacy. So just like we have US data privacy laws, globally, there are data privacy laws as well. And so data protection, you want to make sure you're compliant. You probably heard of the GDPR. That is Europe's law that basically says, look, our country citizens have these rights, regardless of where, regardless of whether you're doing physical business in the state. If they sign up for your mailing list, if they purchase from you, even if you stay in the US, guess what? You still have to comply with GDPR. And so there are certain requirements that they have, including having a cookie policy pop-up, including making sure that your data privacy, your privacy policy actually lists out these rights and include a data protection officer, the name of the name or the contact information for the officer that they can contact. That's all in compliance, y'all, with international law. All right, so you want to make sure you understand the laws of those countries, those clients. And for those of you who are like, how in the world do I do this? Just real quick, I have a company called 180 Contracts. And so there I have a privacy policy. It's inexpensive. But I have a privacy policy. And what I do periodically, and I just recently did it either this year or the end of last year, is I go through all of the laws internationally and I update the privacy policy to comply with all of the laws, because certain states in the US are actually coming up with their new laws. Some of them roll out in 2026, some of them roll out in 2027. Some of them don't apply to us because we're not we're not selling people's information, but some of it does apply to us. So we want to make sure that we are compliant. So you can go to 180contracts.com and check that out. But that's a separate company from the law firm, just so you know. But that's something that I offer just in case you're like, how in the world do I do this? There you go. All right. Data protection laws also deal with how you handle data. So you can't just handle data any kind of way, and how you share data. So we share data whether we realize it or not. We share it with other companies like our email marketing system, our payment processor system. We're always sharing data. And so sometimes you have to, majority of the times, you have to disclose who you're sharing data with. Other considerations, legal considerations, is cross-border data transfer rules. So Jeffrey, you mentioned that you go to other countries and do events. So if you're transporting data across country borders, you want to be mindful of those rules and what the restrictions are. Oh, that's awesome. Look, I was like, I know it's PCI. It's been a minute. So apparently Jeffrey is a subject matter expert in payment card industry. Jeffrey, you can put your information there if you want to, and I'll share it on live just in case somebody needs it. We got an expert in the room, y'all. I don't mind sharing the information. And Bina, you can share your information too if you want. The other thing is, okay, so cross-border transfer, there are certain restrictions on how you can transfer data and move it across borders and jurisdictions. So you want to be mindful of that. And then cybersecurity obligations. So you have to make sure that you're meeting the foreign security standards to store and handle customer data. Look, I know this is a lot, but the reality is we're in business, and so it's our responsibility to be caught up. And this is why when it comes to legal protection, if you hire an attorney, they might not know all of this to tell you, consider this, consider that, because we don't practice all of this stuff. And many U.S. attorneys, we are not practicing international law. And so because they're not practicing international business law, they may not be aware of this. And so this is why we want to be mindful of, and this is why the legal pop-ups exist, to kind of help you think about these things and think through these things. But be mindful that these are things that you need to consider. And you can do this over time before you actually go international. All right, let's move into contracts and disputes. So contracts and disputes, one of the things that you want to have and think through in your contract is choice of law and jurisdiction clauses. So what's the law that's going to govern? Where is litigation or any dispute going to take place? So you want to specify the country's laws and apply where the disputes are resolved. So if it's going to be U.S. with the U.S. Now, if y'all have been with me, maybe reading my emails, I'm trying to think about putting an email, but I'm gonna tell you this. When it comes to jurisdiction, it's not just enough to have the state. You also need to include the county within your state if you're in the U.S. Why? Because how big is your state? How big is your state? It's really big, okay? So we want to reduce our travel costs and expenses. That's how we keep expenses low. And so if you're going to do an international law, you want to consider that as well. How can you reduce it to the actual location or jurisdiction? Next, you want to consider if you're going to do this. So there are different ways to resolve disputes outside of a lawsuit. You have arbitration, you have mediation, and you have negotiation. I like to put that we'll resolve it through good faith negotiation, meaning we can negotiate between the parties, try to resolve it. But you also have mediation, and then you have arbitration. Arbitration means there's a third party, but their decision is legally binding. It's like a judge, but it's not in a courtroom. And so with arbitration clauses for international disputes, you have to think through this, right? Do you have the budget to do this? But you want to think through and consider, if you want an international arbitration instead of a foreign court litigation. And so things that you want to consider is, if you're going to do international arbitration, can it be done remotely? Can it be done with you in the US? Because now we're talking about, look, when we talk about litigation, we're talking about travel costs. We're talking about hotel costs. We're talking about time away from our families and our business. We have to calculate the cost when we are thinking about our contracts and where litigation is going to take place, or arbitration. So you want to ask, can it be done remotely? If it can't be done remotely, then you might want to consider it being in the United States versus it being international. Okay, that's how you shift it from, you shift it in your favor. Again, I mentioned this and I'll mention it again with contracts. Think about translation and dual language contracts. So you can have the contract in their language and then the English contract as well. So they see both and you have both together, because some countries actually require that the contract be in the local language. Next is think through force majeure and risk clauses. So force majeure says that you don't have a duty to perform your obligations. Like if there's a breach, you're released from any consequences of that breach if it's due to circumstances beyond your control. So like acts of God, tornadoes, tsunamis, mudslides. If there is, I put other things, y'all, into my contracts, because we know other things. But for example, wars, that's beyond your control. And so you want to think about that, especially when you're doing business international. How long has Russia and Ukraine been in that war? How is that impacting, right, business in that region? So you want to think about that when you're thinking of going international. Where is war taking place? And even staying abreast of the news is where is it a potential conflict for war to take place, so that you are being strategic in your business and making wise business decisions before you go international. You also want to think about protest and political upheaval. So account for the political, the economic, and supply chain disruptions. It's not just enough to pay attention to the tariffs happening with the United States, but you also want to think about trade conversations and any supply chain disruptions and possible famines, and where there's issues with production materials in other countries, not just with the US, but maybe they have relationships with other countries. So this is for every country that you're thinking about. You need to do an assessment, okay, so that you can make an informed decision about whether or not that is your country. And so I just want to shout out Bina right here. She is Bina Pittman is a wardrobe stylist, and she's also in legal global compliance. And so I don't know what that is, but you can drop your website if you want, and I will share your website. I don't mind, y'all. Okay. I just did a training last night. And so one of the things that I facilitate when I do trainings is, you never know who's in the room and who needs it. I never know who's going to come across this video and they might need your services. Okay. Wardrobe stylist. Okay, now let's move to foreign tax and accounting. Taxes, y'all. What they say, two things in life are guaranteed: death and taxes. If you're interested in personal styling by Bina, you can go to personal stylist Bina, BINA.com, personalstylistbina.com. And you can learn more about our wonderful Bina. So foreign tax and accounting. Okay. So you want to think through foreign corporate tax liability. So if you're going to register your company in another country, you want to think through what that liability is going to be, but that's more of a domestic company. If you are doing business in the US and moving over, you want to think, are they going to tax you for doing business there? You want to know that. Why? Because it factors into how you price, how you do business, how you adjust your numbers of what you need in your business. Another thing is permanent establishment risk. So there is something where you do repeated sales or you have employees in a country that it might trigger foreign tax reporting. And I mentioned this about having, employees live somewhere and do work. This is why even with your US and your US workers, I do not advocate for using language that says remote workers. I say you have to be, work from home, because home is different. And I put restrictions on that because, again, you don't want your tax liability going up. So there's things you have to consider, because it's not just this, what we're talking about, that owing tax to another country is not just international. It also happens in the United States. If somebody decides that they want to spend a certain amount of time in another state, then that might actually happen to you as well. All right. I think New York is one of those states that have a law that after so many times, you got to start paying taxes for your worker being in their state. So you want to be mindful of that. Is what's the time length for someone being there, and what transactions or interactions you have in that state that would trigger you from having now to pay foreign tax. You also want to think through double taxation treaties. What countries have treaties that will require you to be taxed doubly? And so you want to avoid being taxed twice on the same income, okay? This is how you do business wisely. And then foreign bank account reporting. So the U.S. has laws that require reporting of foreign accounts or financial interests. So you want to be aware if you have a bank account set up in Dubai or set up in another country, having to report that to the US. All right, we're almost at the end. Local business requirements. So locally, you want to be aware if you have to get licensing or business registration. Does your operation in that country require you to have a business license, or does it require you to register your business? And so some countries actually require foreign businesses to register locally. Look, just like over there in the US, there are certain activities that will actually require you to be registered in another state as a foreign entity. Okay. Foreign just means you're from another state or another country, whereas domestic means that you are originally from that state or that country. That's all it means. So you want to be aware of that. You also want to be aware of foreign ownership restrictions. So there are certain sectors of industry that limit foreign ownership or require local partners. I was talking to someone a couple of months ago, and I'm trying to think where it was. Maybe it was China or it was somewhere, but they were sharing with me how there are restrictions on the ability to own land, that foreigners can't own land in that country until they have been there like residency for a certain amount of time, or like rent certain places. So there are certain restrictions that you want to be mindful of depending on what your business operations are in that country. Anti-bribery. Now, I believe that in this law firm, and even those coming to just our community events, we are folks of integrity and we are upstanding. So this really don't apply to us, but we're going to cover it. So there are anti-bribery and anti-corruption compliance laws, meaning that first and foremost, the U.S. bans bribing foreign officials abroad. So you cannot bribe people, okay? Y'all, you just don't, we can't bribe. But this doesn't apply to us because we are upstanding citizens. We don't bribe. And anti-money laundering compliance. So you want to make sure, the Corporate Transparency Act, although it's on pause now for U.S. businesses, that whole thing was a part of trying to stop money laundering, making sure it doesn't happen. So you want to make sure that, you're not unintentionally engaging in activities that are money laundering. Also do your due diligence so you're not scammed or unintentionally sewing into organizations and businesses that support organizations that are a part of that are a part of money laundering or in the crime or quote unquote terrorist activities. Okay. I put quote unquote terrorist activities because it depends on who you ask, but you want to be mindful of that. So you want to know your customer, know your client, and your financial transaction reporting know that your financial transaction may be required. Okay. Reporting may be required. So like I know, for example, PayPal and most payment processors in the US actually report our transactions to the government. They report on us. And then I believe this is it. So logistics and operational risk. So if you got to be aware of shipping liability and insurance. If you're shipping, sometimes, especially if you're doing events overseas, Jeffrey, it might be cheaper to ship books or ship things overseas versus taking them on the plane with you. And so sometimes we can ship things even if we're not technically in selling products. We can ship things that are connected to our service overseas. And so you want to be aware of shipping liability and insurance that clearly defines who's responsible for the goods and services if you're shipping it to a client, but also for us personally. Product safety standards. So we talked about that as well. We talked a little bit about this, but recall and warranty liability. So when you see in the news, when they say this product is being recalled, you want to be mindful of that. What are the procedures and insurance in place in case their product issues abroad? And that's something I didn't touch on. But depending on what your business is, you might want to think about insurance that covers you abroad and in that country, so that you have more cushion for liability and for liability protection, and that you can really protect yourself overseas. And then, of course, you want to think about local cultural and legal norms. So understand how the local customs might impact contract enforcement, marketing, and hiring, but also what offends them in that culture, because the US is not another culture. What flies here is not what flies over there, okay? When I was in Paris, I remember thinking like, Paris is very different. And for some of us, whether you're watching a replay or not, if you are a person of color, there are certain countries that deal with us very differently. I learned my lesson in Paris. London was beautiful. Paris, I was like, oh, okay, all right, Okay. Now, again, sometimes it's not just your skin color, okay, or your gender. Sometimes it's the fact that you are American. Okay, some countries just don't like Americans. Okay, they don't like gringos, right? They just don't like us. I hope gringos is the right time. I ain't look. Y'all, I don't know the language. I ain't trying to be intentionally offensive, but it is what it is. The reality is these things exist. And so we have to be aware culturally, be emotionally intelligent, culturally intelligent, to know that there are certain things in the culture that in the other country, it just don't translate. There's certain things that you just don't do. And you want to be aware of that, of how you do that. The Parisians were cold and somewhat rude. Oh, I haven't been there. Look, they ain't gonna stop me from traveling. I took French 1, and it was in a mixed class in high school, so I hadn't gone beyond the basics of French. And that could be a thing too, is the language barrier, but it ain't gonna stop me from traveling. Cold, rude, it might interrupt, but I'm still gonna get what I need, baby, and I'm still gonna have a good old time. And so just be mindful, because it's a difference between personal travel. I was doing personal travel, and when you're doing business, because in business, they can shut you out. When I was in Paris, I was actually there for a competition in, I think we were doing a mediation competition. And so in that regard, I've since let it go. It's been some years, but you can tell there was some racism. Okay. Anywho, I say that to say is that we don't always know what's behind our interactions, or our contract, maybe not, or why we are facing things. So as a woman of color, and I'm going to give y'all the strategy that I have used before. As a woman of color, I've had to strategically use allies. And you might have to do the same in your business, which means if I have an ally that's a white man, I may use my ally. Why? Because I understand how a white man is perceived in America, versus if it's someone overseas, I might use an ally that speaks the language, that looks the language, and depending on what the culture respects, it could be a woman or a man. Okay, some cultures actually give more reverence to women than they do men. Use your allies. It is a weapon in business. Okay. And it's a weapon personally as well. Oh, the Italians. I still haven't gone to Italy. I want to go to Italy. I want to go to Sicily. Oh, I cannot wait. It's on my travel list. It is on my travel list. Okay. So I talked about that. OFAC is Office of Foreign Assets Control. I knew I wrote it down here in my notes. And I'm trying to think, did I cover everything? Yep. I cover everything. All right, y'all. So that is it for legal considerations for going global and doing business internationally. I have a checklist. I will be providing the link to that checklist. I'm going to open up to Q&A in just a moment if you have more questions, but you will have access to the checklist. If you're watching the replay, you're on YouTube, and you want the checklist, I'm going to make that available at legacylegalconsults.com/products with the S on it, products. And that is our resource page, or you can go to legacylegalconsult.com and click on resources, and it'll be a link there. Let's just say by May 1st, I'm gonna give myself a break. By May 1st, you will have a link there that you can click on, and you can put your information in and download the checklist. Okay. So you will have that. Thank you so much. I'm glad you found that this was helpful, and very helpful. Thank you again, Jeffrey. Okay, so let me close this out, and then we're going to start the Q&A portion.